Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Go FUD Yourself. JD Gagnon here. And today, another one of my good friends, but not Kiara. It's Mr. Patrick. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good, man. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us again in Kiara's absence. Always a pleasure to have someone much smarter than I am on the call. Patrick, just quickly, maybe you can fill everybody in. You've been on the show a few times. We'll post all your links and everything underneath. But what kind of stuff are you working on, and what's your area of focus generally?
So I have an academic background. Did my PhD in finance at UCLA Anderson, and then became a self-taught software programmer, software developer. Out of there, started building smart contract applications about 3 years ago at IC3 at Cornell. So the first thing we built was Arrow Markets, which is an options trading platform on Avalanche, and we have a bunch of things rolling out for Arrow Markets during the course of the fall that we're really excited about. We can talk more about that, but that's my background.
Awesome, thanks, man. I mean, we have a lot of deep conversations, you and I, outside and inside of the work sphere, but specifically talking about global news and movement and momentum for the space. So excited to chat through some of these ideas with you today. Just for people that are tuning in, today we're going to talk about Ethereum's Holsky network upgrade and some of the challenges they had. Mark Cuban got scammed. We were going to talk about that yesterday, but it got bumped into today. We're talking a little bit about Binance versus the US. We're going to talk about the state of New York and their tightening of crypto listings. Talk about Hong Kong a little bit. Blockchain Capital raised another fund, which is incredible at $600 million they raised. I think VC is coming back if we needed a signal. And a few other things. So super action-packed show today. Quick reminder, we are a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. It is live. You can tell because I say dumb shit and we don't edit it out all the time. So like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. We don't commercialize this puppy. It's really just a service to the communities and trying to give back to the space a little bit. What we do commercialize, I guess, is people hook me up with merch and then I'll wear it on the air and do a shout out. So today it's Opolis. Patrick was wearing this shirt yesterday. And so I was inspired to bring it on the pod today. All right. Okay, we will play our little video here and then we will get freaking going. Let's go. All right, we are back and ready to rock. All right, man. So did you hear about this ETH network upgrade?
I didn't hear too much about it, so why don't you fill me in on some of the details?
Yeah, I'll tee you up here, and then we can chat about it. So essentially, what they've done is, in the interest of scalability for Ethereum, they, on the 1-year anniversary of the merge, which was, I think, a couple of days ago, they were launching this Holsky testnet. And the idea of the Holsky testnet was essentially post-merge, they wanted to try and double the amount of validators relative to mainnet and see if that, in fact, scaled the way that they expected it to and created the performance enhancements that they had hoped and security enhancements they hoped. To make a long story short, they got all fired up and went to launch this thing. And one of the, let me make sure I don't misstate this. There was a misconfiguration in, where did I see that? Misconfiguration in one of the Genesis files. And it caused a 2-week delay. And so everybody was freaking out thinking, oh my God, ETH is broken and the upgrade ideas aren't going to work and so on. Do you think this is like Band-Aids on a sinking ship with a hole in the hull, or kind of what are your, and I don't mean that to be super negative about ETH. I think ETH is always going to be here to stay. I'm just not sure that continuing to build the plane in the air is going to continue indefinitely. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think ETH is going anywhere, and I also think they're kind of locked into this, this kind of style of making upgrades. I'm not sure they have a viable alternative in terms of, they're thinking about what types of improvements can we make to the network, and how do we actually implement them, and actually have, the validators pick up, whatever the new ingredients of the code are, the new features. I don't see any other kind of process available to them in terms of making those upgrades and being adaptive over time. And I think you can't expect each of these steps to kind of go off without a hitch. And so I think Ethereum has proven itself that, they are going to be making progress. They are here to stay. Not every attempt is perfect. By the way, that's why they do these things on testnet first and so forth. It's not something that makes me think any differently about the promise of Ethereum going forward.
Yeah, I guess what got a lot of people up in arms on this was there's a Denken hard fork that's supposed to deal with the proto-dank sharding and a few other things. So everybody was worried that it was going to delay that timeline. Luckily, it has not delayed that timeline, apparently. I mean, if you remember, the merge had some issues and kept getting pushed off, and so this is pretty standard, obviously. I'm just curious how much longer they can keep up with the rest of the space that has blank slates. There's so much tech debt in being a first mover, which Ethereum obviously was. There's so many things that you do and design and architecture decisions you make early on that later on to try to change or unwind is a pretty sizable thing.
I mean, they kind of have, there are these legacy, I don't want to, in this case, they're not even necessarily costs. They're almost legacy advantages. The fact that so many people, researchers and developers are focused on Ethereum gives them a little bit more kind of wiggle room in terms of being able to roll things out maybe a little more slowly than they planned, or roll things out that have little kinks in them. And there are all kind of all these other things that are being built on top of Ethereum layer 2s, but also things like, frankly, I think Eigenlayer is very interesting. So there are a lot of these other ways that people are building on top of the infrastructure that Ethereum made available to the public that kind of mean that it's unstoppable. And it's also, it's not just the work that the people at the EF are doing in terms of upgrading the core Ethereum network. It's also the work of all of these communities who are developing kind of, like I said, layer 2s and other kind of peripheral ways to build on top of, the trust in the public Ethereum network. So, and I don't think any of that stuff is going to slow down. And a lot of this stuff, like the development of the layer 2s and like I said, things like Eigenlayer, they aren't constrained by any of the same constraints that, for example, the EF is constrained by. So they can kind of move faster, and Ethereum really has proven itself as this playground where different developers and different communities can build these tools on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful that ETH is going through this process, because I think what they're doing is illustrating to the rest of us, what potential exists and how we would navigate kind of evolving these live, living, interoperable, composable ecosystems. Because the contagion, I use that phrase a lot, but I'm using it in a different context here. The contagion of one small code error somewhere can have impacts on many second and third order protocols and operations and structures and products. And so, I mean, this is really an incredible case study in just figuring this out as we go. And it will inform a lot of future, I think, evolution of the space. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I don't, like you said, I don't think ETH is going anywhere. I mean, it's one heck of a challenge for them to overcome, to outcompete a new L1 with the blank slate. Go ahead.
Exactly. And I think to your point, it is important that there are also these other experiments that are being kind of run independently of Ethereum. So you have all of these things that are being built on top of Ethereum, these layer 2s, like I was just mentioning, but Then you have standalone ecosystems like Avalanche or Cosmos or Polkadot or Solana or whatever it is. And it's important for these experiments to be able to be, to be carried out in a way that's independent of a lot of the Ethereum infrastructure. One thing that I find very interesting is things like MEV are, if you look at the literature on MEV, it's very narrowly focused on the specific implications of the Ethereum architecture. And I think in some of these cases, there are kind of more general phenomena that are worth studying or worth kind of building out that can't be expressed to their fullest potential within the specific confines of the Ethereum architecture. So, I think it is also important for these independent experiments that aren't subject to those same architecture constraints to be carried out.
Yeah, definitely exciting. I mean, this is the reason I'm still here building, is we're learning new stuff every day. And we're constantly building in directions that really haven't been built in. And to me, that's what's fun. That's what's exciting and challenging and so on. Okay, so one of the not so fun parts of the space that I think most of us that have been around a minute have been impacted by one way or another. Maybe me as bad as most or worse than most, because I seem to be a bit of an idiot and get caught up in these things every now and then. I think I've been scammed probably for, I don't know, 400 or 500K, which over the course of like the last maybe decade. So we're all exposed to it. The more times you get yourself in these uncertain scenarios, it's definitely a risk that needs to be assessed. Now, Mark Cuban, $870,000 in a crypto scam is a very, very distant rounding error for his net worth. So, I mean, we're not talking about this story because we want anybody to feel sorry for Mark Cuban. He's actually, was a pretty good proponent of the space for a minute, lost a bunch of money and was publicly FUDing, and then hasn't done anything for like 160 days. Then all of a sudden, there's some activity, and it's very strange activity that's been going on, and there you go, 870K was stolen. So what they concluded was that there was probably some sort of phishing or malicious download of a MetaMask version that even Mark Cuban, one of the world's leading tech entrepreneurs and multi-billionaire from technology, still can make some missteps and have problems. So short of trying to dissect this scenario in particular, what does this tell you, and what should people take away from stories like this?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not the first one to say this, obviously, but one of the lessons, of course, is don't keep $1 million in a hot wallet. This is a reason to use a hardware wallet, and I know a lot of people who they'll keep most of their funds in a hardware wallet. They'll move a little bit to a hot wallet to do some active trading or to kind of move things around in some apps, but because of risks of things like this, the bulk of the funds are kept in a hard wallet. And I think that's, like I said, I'm not the first person to say this, but that's obviously the best practice.
Yeah. I actually didn't even think about that fact, that it probably was in a like EOA with no hardware security. So that's that also is concerning. So that's a really good point. I think, during the bear market, we were reporting often that on the surface, it felt like scams and theft was down. And the answer is, I think that the raw amount of tokens stolen, it definitely wasn't down. I just think the value of those tokens were down significantly in the depths of the bear relative to the bull. My point in all of this is you got to stay vigilant, especially during times when things feel slow. Of course, when times are moving fast, be vigilant too. But when it's slow, and it's really easy to get complacent and thinking that it's a bear market, nobody's paying attention. No, scammers are still paying attention, especially if they had a taste of scamming in the last cycle. They're back again with new and creative ways. So I think we could probably jump away from that one and get to one of my favorite topics, Binance and the SEC. But yeah, just to sum up, be careful. And if you're not careful and you make poor decisions, sometimes you get in some hot water with the SEC. So we were talking about this over the last few days maybe not the last few days, but over the last week or so, we've talked about this a couple of times on the show. Binance has had some of an exodus of executives at Binance proper, and then of course, I think it was last week, we started seeing the CEO resign and some other people resign, and CZ was talking really weird about all of this stuff, and his explanations we were like, what? And I've been saying this for, going on probably 6 months now. To me, I struggle understanding what Binance could possibly be, what their strategy is here, because some of the decisions and some of the actions that they're taking now are puzzling. Like, it's really hard to decipher what the hell they're trying to accomplish. Anyways, one of the big reasons for a lot of this uncertainty with Binance is the pending litigation with the SEC. So they've been accused of some pretty crazy shit from the SEC and also from the CFTC. Binance US is in deep doo-doo with US regulators. And so essentially, what happens in these cases is they go back and forth and motion this and motion that, and it gets drug on forever. And it's very incredibly expensive lawyering. If you look at Ripple, between individual defenses and Ripple proper defense, they're at $500 million in legal fees. It's kind of insane. Anyways, all of this to say that now the judge in the Binance case has more or less come out saying, let's get going. Essentially, what happened? So she said Zia Faruqi is the judge in the case. She said that essentially she declined to order Binance US executives to appear for depositions or to compel the SEC to scale back its document requests. Instead, he encouraged both parties to collaborate on resolving their discovery disputes and get on with it. The judge suggested that the SEC refine its document requests while permitting depositions of certain shareholders to ascertain safety of Binance US's funds. So to summarize this quickly, and then I'll get some of your thoughts on this, Patrick, but essentially what's happening is at this point in these trials, often discovery is a big thing, depositions are a big thing, and one of the areas of significant lawyering is all the motions and nonsense that happens during this period. Who needs to be deposed, what documents need to be reviewed, is it overkill, is it, are you just trying to bury us in administration? The judge is saying, okay, let's cut the crap and kind of get to it a little bit. I'm not sure that this is super out of the ordinary. I think most judges encourage cooperation. But how do you feel about this? Do you think this is just the natural progression of this situation here for Binance, or are things heating up a little bit?
Yeah, that's hard to gauge. I mean, my sense is things were kind of hot from the get-go. So yeah. I'm not sure, how much more meaningfully they could heat up. I guess, do we know how much or to what extent, trading volume or user activity on Binance has changed since the SEC started going after Binance US and you started seeing all of this kind of reshuffling? How much has it materially impacted their business? That would be something I'm interested in knowing. My guess is it's had a non-trivial impact.
Yeah, well, Binance US volumes have all but disappeared. Binance proper obviously probably isn't impacted by this that much. But having said that, there again, to use this stupid phrase, the contagion here is apparent, right? The UK declined all Binance's license applications. They moved out of Cyprus. They moved out of the Netherlands and somewhere else. They've been moving out of a lot of European jurisdictions. Germany told them to beat it. And all of this is because of the uncertainty and the accusations from the SEC. So, I think their volumes globally have probably been impacted, maybe second order impacts as opposed to direct, but I think for sure it has to be impacted them.
That's my guess. And so one of the effects of the SEC coming after Binance here is it's materially deteriorating their business prospects, which may or may not have been one of the motivating objectives for the SEC for going after them in the first place. It's interesting, after FTX, after the FTX collapse, it kind of looked like Binance was kind of the category leader, and it didn't take too long for the SEC to go after them and kind of start kind of breaking that down. And my guess is there's been a significant impact on their business. And so one interesting implication is it could be pushing, and I think we've seen some evidence of this, it could be pushing more user activity on chain, away from centralized exchanges, into dApps, and that's probably a good thing, especially when the alternatives are things like Binance and FTX, which are not very transparent in terms of their balance sheet and what types of risks a user has in terms of keeping their funds on the platform. Yeah. So that might not even be a bad thing, but it does seem like an important implication of the SEC action is that it is breaking down Binance in terms of being the category leader for centralized crypto exchanges.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that Binance, finds a way to navigate through this. And I've been saying this since the beginning. I'm not a huge fan, honestly, of a lot of the things that Binance has done, but I do think, if Binance was to be shut down entirely, we would see some serious impacts on the space right now. And so hopefully they can find a way through it. I just think, the SEC was embarrassed by FTX and previously, Terra Luna and Three Arrows and some of this other stuff, that there was a lot of impact, Celsius, Gemini, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this to me kind of makes sense. Like, generally speaking, the pendulum swings then the other way. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with heavy enforcement. This is going to sound ridiculous and at the risk of being not politically correct. The thing about these public, this public litigation is that you're kind of in the court of public opinion as much as you are in the court of the proper court. And it's kind of like the Me Too movement, right? So one of the, and that's why I said this is not very politically correct, but it's kind of like the Me Too movement in the sense that, in the sense that, like, it kind of takes on a life of its own once you've been accused. And the reputational impacts, whether you're acquitted or not, in many cases can continue, right? There could be some negative reputational impacts because of the media coverage and because of things that were publicized. And then usually if it goes away, that's not that exciting, i.e. you were acquitted, the media just quietly stops talking about it. And so often people have persistent opinions that are highly inaccurate when stuff like this happens. So hopefully as this all kind of figures itself out, we'll continue to report on it.
It can be
objective here, but go ahead.
Just on that point, it can kind of go both ways. I mean, we've talked on this podcast before about Coinbase and Brian Armstrong and using the kind of public nature of these battles with the SEC as a critical component of his PR strategy.
That's a really good point, actually. And I think it speaks very well to Brian Armstrong's personality as a very diplomatic leader, somebody that is very strategic and collected and professional. I mean, CZ's never really been known to be that guy. Like he's always kind of been a little Wild West, a little rough around the edges, so to speak, collar flipped. And so, I mean, some guys, that's a really good point. Some guys use it to their advantage if it plays into their strategy, like a Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. Whereas I think Binance in this particular case is I don't know, it's puzzling. Like they haven't even come out and spoken against it other than like some random tweets from CZ that nobody can really make sense of. But anyways, we'll keep following it. We'll keep filling people in on the happenings. We're gonna do one more here. I think let's talk about New York since we're both heading there in the next 24 hours. So New York State, every state has their own financial rules and regulations and so on. And of all the states in the United States, New York is the only one that I'm aware of that has regulated crypto in its state borders in a lot of random, weird ways. And they have for quite some time. There's been licensing requirements and different things if you operate in the state of New York in any way. Well, essentially what they've said now, the New York's Department of Financial Services, has come out with even more restrictive listing restrictions, so to speak, and tighter oversight. So essentially what they're suggesting is that if you're a firm operating in New York, whether you're licensed or chartered, you're now obligated to notify regulators in advance about any coins that you intend to offer. This is mainly for exchanges, by the way, I believe. Yes. And so now they have these stricter regulations. I mean, it's kind of a nothing burger, but I guess everybody's trying to figure this out. We talk so much on regulations. Everybody's trying to figure this out. I mean, you're a New Yorker. Half of you is a New Yorker, I think, at least in principle. How do you feel about this? Do you think this is like, I mean, and this is common, right? The Department of Financial Services in New York is very involved in regulating and overseeing the financial space, in addition to federal regulators. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you've seen your whole life and it's kind of not a big deal, or like to diverge from the rest of the country in this way?
I mean, of course, we have seen places like New York be more aggressive with this type of regulation in the past, not just crypto, but other financial regulations. I mean, even outside of finance, they effectively just banned Airbnb about 2 weeks ago, which is extraordinary. But
we know this because booking hotels was a nightmare for this week.
Exactly.
No availability.
But I also, so they do have a reputation for being aggressive. But I also don't know I don't think we should jump necessarily too quickly to assuming it's a bad thing, because there's a little bit of tension here between, we don't want over-regulation, we don't want gratuitous regulation, but we all agree we do want more clarity. So to the extent these types of steps make it easier for companies to understand what they need to do to be compliant, then that's actually a good thing. And I think, we do need more clarity. So if it contributes to that, like I said, that can actually be a good thing.
I mean, if it works, then it's a good example for the SEC. If it doesn't work, it's a good example for the SEC. So, I mean, I don't mind it. I just think, it's such a huge market in the United States. As long as they provide clarity and a path to coming into compliance, then I'm all for it. All right. We're bumping up against the end of time here. So, Patrick, thanks a ton. It was a pleasure having you on, as always. Anybody that wants to check out Patrick, we'll put some links and stuff under the videos. You can check him out on Twitter and Telegram, and his Substack is pretty awesome if you're looking for some thought pieces. We are a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on every major venue, including Twitter Spaces and Twitch and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and everywhere. Like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. And with that, today I say to you, Patrick, go FUD yourself.